"Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. I don't belong to you." That's all she said. No context, no warning, no build-up. Just those 6 words, dropped like a wrecking ball in the middle of our hallway while she buttoned up her coat. I was holding a basket of laundry, still damp from the dryer, and I remember one sock slipping from the pile and landing at my feet. It stayed there. Neither of us picked it up. "You don't what?" I asked, like I hadn't heard her clearly. "I don't belong to you, Darrel," she repeated, slower this time, like she was reading it off a script. "I never have." My name didn't sound like my name anymore. It sounded like a formality, something cold. She slung her purse over her shoulder, like this was the end of a work shift. I didn't know what to say. My mouth was dry. My chest felt like it forgot how to breathe. She reached for the door, and before she could leave, I said it. Not because I wanted to hurt her, not because I wanted to be clever. Just because it came out raw and automatic, then you're not my problem. She froze, not dramatically, just for a second, as if trying to decide if I meant it, and then she opened the door and left, just like that. No suitcase, no goodbye, no explanation. She walked out into the November cold in nothing but that cheap navy coat she hated, and vanished into the night like this was some normal Thursday. I stood there with the laundry in my arms, still waiting for her to turn back and say it was a joke, or a test, or something else twisted. But the seconds stretched and the silence grew roots. And that's when the knocking started, not at the front door, at the back one. We never used the back door. I turned, heart racing, hands shaking so badly I dropped half the laundry. I opened the door, and standing there, under our busted porch light, was a man I'd never seen before. He looked exhausted, red eyes, unshaven, holding an envelope. And the first thing he said to me was, "I'm sorry. You needed to know this sooner." He knew my name. That was the first thing that chilled me. He didn't ask if I was Darrel. He just said it, like we were old friends meeting again under tragic circumstances. "Darrel, I'm sorry. You needed to know this sooner." The envelope in his hand was yellowed at the edges like it had been carried around too long. I didn't take it immediately. I asked, "Who are you?" He didn't flinch. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just thought, after what she said tonight, you deserve to see it all." My stomach turned. "You know Lenora?" He nodded. More than I should have. That sentence alone, it hit me harder than anything she'd said all week. Against every shred of good judgment, I took the envelope. It was thicker than I expected, not just one sheet. I could feel corners of photos inside. My hands were trembling as I opened it right there in front of him. The first thing I pulled out was a printed receipt. Hotel, 2 weeks ago. Boise, Idaho, then another. Different name, different date, but the same credit card number. And then, the photos. My heart dropped before my eyes even processed them. Lenora, in a red dress I'd never seen before, sitting beside this man, holding his hand in one photo, kissing his cheek in another. One picture showed them in a restaurant booth, leaning in so close you'd think they were the only people in the world. I didn't even know what to say. I just stared at her face. The way she smiled at him, like she used to smile at me when I burned pancakes on Saturday mornings. The man, whose name I still didn't know, kept talking, quietly, apologetically. It started as something small. I didn't expect it to go on. I told her it wasn't right. I backed away, but she kept calling, coming by. She told me things about you, awful things, that you controlled her, that she felt trapped, that she needed to feel alive again. My knees almost buckled. I leaned against the doorframe just to stay standing. She told him she felt trapped? Me? The guy who packed her lunches and kissed her on the forehead before every shift? Who memorized the scent of her shampoo just to make sure I always bought the right one? She said you wouldn't let her go, he continued, so I'm doing it for her. And just like that, he turned and walked off the porch. Didn't ask for the envelope back. Didn't wait for a reaction. He vanished into the same darkness she had, minutes earlier. I stood there, frozen, photos in one hand, receipts in the other, and nothing, absolutely nothing in my head made sense anymore. I didn't cry, not yet. But something inside me cracked in a way I knew couldn't be fixed. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even sit down. I just stood in the kitchen like some forgotten statue, holding the envelope like it had rewired my entire existence. Every time I tried to put it down, I'd find myself pulling another photo from the stack, I wasn't looking for answers. I was looking for something that wasn't there. A shadow of hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of guilt, something to prove she didn't mean it. But no. In every photo, she looked free, joyful, unburdened. And I hated how much I recognized that expression, because it used to be mine. At 4:12 a.m., I heard the key in the front lock. I didn't rush, I didn't hide. I just turned off the light and waited in the shadows. The door creaked open, and she stepped in like she'd just gotten back from a weekend spa retreat. Calm, composed. Not even startled to see the living room light was off. She dropped her keys in the ceramic bowl I made her in our 3rd year of marriage. She didn't know I watched her wipe her hands on her jeans, like she was wiping someone else off of her. I waited until she took off her coat before I said a word. "You really don't belong to me, huh?" She jumped like she'd seen a ghost, clutching her chest, spinning toward the sound of my voice. I flicked the light back on slowly, her face drained of color. I was holding the envelope in one hand, her face smiling back at her from one of the photos. She didn't say anything at first, just stared, like she was trying to decide whether to lie or run. "I met him," I said. "He came here. Said he was tired of being part of your cover story. Said you called me controlling. That I wouldn't let you go." I stepped forward. "I let you go tonight, Lenora. You just didn't realize it." She exhaled hard, not a sigh, more like a release, like a balloon finally losing all its air. "I was going to tell you," she said, barely above a whisper. "Just not like this." "You were going to tell me?" I almost laughed. "When?" "After I made you breakfast again? After another movie night where you pretended to love me for 2 hours and then snuck off to call him in the bathroom?" "I didn't mean for it to get serious," she muttered, eyes darting to the floor. "Then why does it look so easy for you in these photos?" That silenced her. She looked at the envelope in my hand like it was a gun, and for a moment I saw the truth flicker across her face. Not guilt, not regret, relief. And that was the moment I realized she wanted to be caught. Maybe not tonight, maybe not like this, but eventually. And I was the fool who clung to a version of her she'd buried long ago. The next morning didn't feel like morning. It felt like an aftershock. The house was too quiet, the way a stage feels once all the actors leave and the lights go dim. I made coffee out of habit, but it tasted like someone else's routine. Lenora hadn't come home that night. Or maybe she had. I don't know. I didn't go to the bedroom. I stayed on the couch, watching the sun rise through the blinds like it owed me an explanation. At some point, the silence started pressing down on me, and I knew I couldn't just sit in it. I had to do something. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started packing. I grabbed a roll of trash bags and went to our bedroom. Or what used to be ours. I opened her side of the closet. Her scent hit me like a memory I didn't want. Lavender and something faintly citrus. I began removing hangers one by one, careful not to think about how many times I'd seen her wear each dress. But then I noticed something wedged in the corner of the top shelf. A paperback novel, the same one she always claimed she never finished. I pulled it down, and when I flipped it open, something fell out. A folded note. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't addressed to anyone, actually. Just a single sentence scribbled in her handwriting, tucked between chapters like a secret waiting for someone to stumble across it. "He'll never leave me. I'll have to push him." I froze. Read it again. And again. My stomach turned cold. That wasn't just a journal thought. That was a plan. She knew what she was doing, dragging this out, emotionally starving me, planting the idea in my head that I was the reason she couldn't breathe. It was calculated, controlled, a slow burn designed to make me the villain in her escape story. And here I was, still wondering if I'd done something wrong. I sank onto the bed, note in one hand, her book in the other. The realization hit me harder than any of the photos. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd rewritten me, turned me into some prison guard in her head just so she could feel justified walking away. I wasn't the man she left. I was the man she built to leave. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days. No calls, no texts, not even a neighbor's wave through the blinds. It's strange how quickly silence becomes familiar when you've been fed lies for so long. I was packing up the last of Lenora's books when I got a message from her cousin Maybelle. Just a single sentence. Hey Darrel, are you still coming to dinner Sunday night? I stared at it for a long time. Sunday night. That invitation had been on our calendar for 3 weeks. I remember because Lenora had groaned about it, said Maybelle always overcooked the roast and undercooked the gossip. But she'd still RSVP'd. I replied, sure, I'll be there. Not because I wanted roast, but because something didn't add up. Sunday came, and I drove to Maybelle's place in a daze. Her home smelled like cinnamon and denial. She opened the door like nothing had happened, gave me a hug, and said, "You look tired." I wanted to scream, "You knew," but I didn't. Not yet. I needed proof. The dinner table was quiet. Her husband, Todd, chewed too loud. Maybelle poured wine like she was on autopilot. Then, as casual as someone mentioning the weather, she asked, "So, have you two figured things out yet?" My fork froze midair. "Figured what out?" I asked. She blinked like she just realized I hadn't been looped in on the script. "Well, I mean, Lenora told us she was thinking of taking space, that you were being, a little intense." There it was, the script, delivered right on cue. My heart thudded, but I kept my face calm. "She told you that?" I asked. "She didn't want to worry you," Maybelle said quickly. "She just needed clarity. You know?" "No," I said flatly. "I don't know." Todd cleared his throat, suddenly interested in the mashed potatoes. Maybelle shifted in her chair. "I found the note," I said quietly, "and the photos, and the man she said she'd stopped seeing. He showed up at my door." Silence. Maybelle's wine glass trembled slightly in her hand. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered. She didn't deny it. She just looked sad. She begged me not to say anything, said she needed to handle it her way, that she didn't want you to fall apart. I stood. She didn't want me to fall apart, or she didn't want me to know the truth before she had a new place to land. Maybelle didn't answer. Todd still hadn't looked up. That was the moment it hit me. Lenora didn't just leave me. She recruited people to help her disappear, and I was the only one who hadn't gotten the memo. I didn't go home after Maybelle's dinner. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly for nearly 2 hours, pulling into empty parking lots, gas stations, even a closed-down bowling alley I hadn't been to since high school. I kept replaying her words, not Lenora's, but Maybelle's. She begged me not to say anything. That hit me harder than the affair. The lying was one thing. The premeditation, the way she had roped other people into protecting the fantasy. That was something else. She hadn't just decided to leave me. She'd written a whole script, passed out roles, and left me off the cast list. By the time I got home, it was close to midnight. The house was still dark. I walked in, not expecting her to be there, but she was. Lenora sat in the living room with her coat still on, like she'd just arrived or never felt at home long enough to take it off. The look on her face wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was exhaustion, like someone who just finished lying their way through a maze and realized they were still lost. "You saw Maybelle," she said before I even opened my mouth. I didn't answer. I just stood in the doorway, gripping my keys so tight they left marks in my palm. She looked down. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this." "Then how did you plan for me to find out, Lenora?" I asked. "Through a post-it on the fridge? An Instagram bio update?" She exhaled sharply. "You don't understand how trapped I felt." There it was. Trapped, the word she'd weaponized. "You weren't trapped," I snapped. "You were comfortable. You had a man who loved you, a roof over your head, friends who lied for you, and a life you didn't have to earn every morning. But that wasn't enough, was it?" She stood slowly. "Darrel, you always needed me to be this soft, predictable version of myself. I couldn't breathe in that anymore." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You couldn't breathe because you were too busy trying to live 2 lives at once." Silence stretched between us. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I didn't fall in love with him because of you. I fell in love with him in spite of you." That was the sentence that broke me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was said so calmly, like it was some fact she'd practiced in front of a mirror 100 times. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. I didn't stop her. As the door clicked shut behind her, I realized she hadn't come back to apologize. She'd come back to justify the wreckage. The next morning, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was surgical, clean, sharp, sterile, like the aftermath of a carefully executed operation. No chaos, no mess, just absence. Her shoes were gone, her toothbrush. The drawer where she kept her scarves sat empty like it had always been that way. She hadn't stormed out. She hadn't cried. She'd prepared, and that made it worse, because this wasn't a moment of passion. This was a plan, one I wasn't meant to notice until long after it was complete. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for what felt like hours. I didn't know what I was waiting for. An apology tucked under the pillow? A text? Some sign that maybe she'd realized what she'd done? Nothing came. So I did the only thing I hadn't done yet. I sat at her desk. Lenora always kept a cluttered workspace. Notebooks stacked on top of sketch pads, receipts jammed into drawers, pens that never worked when you needed them. I wasn't searching for anything specific. I think I just needed to feel close to the version of her that used to doodle hearts beside my name. That version felt like a myth now. Then I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a folder labeled "Private" in red ink. Not hidden, not locked. Almost like she wanted it to be found once she was gone. I hesitated, heart pounding, and opened it. The first thing I saw was a lease agreement, a fully signed contract for a studio apartment 2 towns over. Start date, 3 weeks ago. She'd already moved most of her essentials there, probably during her walks. My hands trembled as I flipped to the next document. A joint bank statement. Except it wasn't joint anymore. The savings account we built for emergencies, the one I hadn't checked in months because I trusted her, was almost completely drained. Transfers, quiet, small, frequent. Over time, 100 here, 300 there, spread across 6 months. I hadn't noticed because she was careful, subtle. Each move invisible until you looked at the full picture. She'd been bleeding us dry with a scalpel. The last item in the folder was a list. A literal list, titled, "What I Need Before I Go." Transfer final funds. Keys to new place change, phone password. Pick up backup phone, schedule mail, forwarding. Get closure with Darrel. That last one had a question mark. She wasn't just planning a new life. She was project managing her escape. I sat there, fingers digging into the edge of the desk, pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the efficiency, the coldness, the way I'd become a footnote on her to-do list. Just another box to maybe check. Or maybe not. I didn't confront her after I found the folder. Not in person, not through text, not even in anger. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't shrink me into a version of myself I didn't want to be anymore. She had crafted her exit with surgical precision, and I'd spent weeks chasing the shadows of someone who had already disappeared long before she walked out the door. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of watching me unravel further. Instead, I gathered every last item she left behind. The old receipts, the half-used perfume, even the list she wrote with my name on it like I was an errand, and placed them all in a sealed box. No fire, no dramatic goodbye, just a quiet removal, like peeling off a bandage that's clung too long to broken skin. I left it outside her new apartment door with a note taped to the top. 3 words, "I release you." That was it. No spite, no sarcasm, just closure. Mine, not hers. And something strange happened after that. I started sleeping again. I started cooking real meals, not just microwaved excuses to stay alive. I took long walks, not because I needed space from someone, but because the air finally felt like mine. I reconnected with an old friend I hadn't seen in years. And you know what? I laughed, genuinely laughed. It felt rusty at first, but it was real. And then, one morning, I passed by a mirror and didn't wince. I looked at the man staring back and thought, "You're still here. You're still whole." She didn't take everything. Lenora's betrayal didn't break me. It revealed me. And now, I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm free. To anyone out there sitting in silence, waiting for the apology that won't come, let me be the one to tell you, you don't need it. Sometimes the closure is in the survival. Sometimes the healing begins the moment you stop needing them to understand. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments, what's one powerful, real historical event you think more people should know about? Let's make this a space for stories that matter. And if you connected with this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more every week, only on Reddit Confessions.